And it is now 6 o'clock, so we will call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Shawnee Mission School District Board of Education. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise with us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll next seek a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
Move approval, Sinclair.
Is there a second?
Second, Borgman.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Item 1.4, approval of the minutes from the special public comment meeting on November 15th. Is there a motion to approve?
Move approval, Hembry.
Second, Goodburn.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And item 1.5, approval of the minutes for the regular meeting on November 15th, 2021.
Move approval, Guy.
And a second?
Second, Goodburn.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And we will now turn it over to Dr. Hubbard for her superintendent report.
Thank you, President Owsley. I'm going to start with Battle of the Brain finalist. A group of elementary students in the Northwest area are Battle of the Brains finalists. Their proposal to build an exhibit at Science City was selected out of 750 entries submitted by 6,400 students in Kansas City. This group, made up of Mill Creek Elementary and Good Shepherd Enhanced Learning students, created a proposal called A Green Idea, a Pollution Solution. The Battle of the Brains winner receives a $50,000 grant and a chance to see their proposal become reality. Our community can support them by voting once a day. We'll include a link where you can support them in our SMSD team recap. The next thing I want to highlight is a student storefront. Shawnee Mission West students have started real businesses. Through an innovative partnership with Oak Park Mall, their entrepreneurial startups are now on display. These Shawnee Mission West student businesses feature clothing, accessories, and home decor. Some are using crowdfunding platforms to cover expenses for startup of their business. These students are all working with business teacher Tiffany Dixon, and I want to congratulate all of them on opening the Real World Learning Store. Shoppers can find their storefront near JCPenney's at Oak Park Mall. We will also include a link in the recap for anyone who is ready to browse and support our student entrepreneurs. Pete's Garden. Shawnee Mission Culinary Arts students have been cooking up a lot of meals to serve a great cause. Last week, they prepared 1,000 meals to give to families who need them in our Shawnee Mission community. Their work, called Kids Feeding Kids, is sponsored by Pete's Garden, 15 and the Mahomes Foundation and Lucky International. We know our culinary students are so talented, and we are so proud of how they use their skills to help people receive a much-needed meal. We thank everyone who came together to make this effort possible. And now for Apple Distinguished Schools. I'm proud to share that Briarwood, Broken Arrow, and Trailwood Elementary are all Apple Distinguished Schools. This recognition is given to schools who are centers of innovation, leadership, and educational excellence, especially in their use of technology to support education. This is the third time all three of these schools have received this honor. What an amazing accomplishment for all the students and the staff of these schools. Seal of Biliteracy. Our district is the state leader in earning the Kansas Seal of Biliteracy. The Kansas State Department of Education recognized 116 Shawnee Mission students as earning this seal based on their work in the 2020-21 school year. This recognizes any student who has attained proficiency in English and one or more other world languages. The skills students learn in obtaining this certification support our objective that every student have a personalized learning plan that will prepare them for college and career with the interpersonal skills they need for life success. This was achieved during a challenging year, and we are so impressed by the work of our student and educators. Biotech poster. Olivia Fritz, a Shawnee Mission West senior and biotechnology signature program student, won first place in the Kansas City One Health Day poster contest. She presented research on polystyrene degradation via black soldier flies to high education faculty and scientists. She won top honors in high school division with a $200 prize, and she is updating this research as the school year continues. Congratulations to Olivia. Broken Arrow Elementary and Shawnee Mission North have been recognized as National PTA Schools of Excellence. They are the only two schools in our state to be given this honor this year. This recognizes a school's commitment to building an inclusive and welcoming school community where all families contribute to enriching the educational experience and overall well-being for all students. These family-school connections make our community stronger, and we are so glad to have these schools recognized for their PTA work. They will both be recognized tomorrow at the state board meeting. Communications honors. It has been a very strong year for the district's communications team. They have received state and national recognition for their work in school communication. They were recognized by the National School Public Relations Association for their work to inform the public about the 2021 bond and the 2020 virtual fall breakfast and the district-wide quarterly art show. The Kansas School Public Relations Association honored the team for their bond work, their presentation of the Research and Development Forum, and the virtual foundation breakfast. We congratulate the team on their outstanding work telling our SMSD story. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. Lisa Gruman to the podium to introduce our next Shawnee Mission All-Star.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm excited to welcome Isabella Vasquez with me today, and we are excited to introduce our All-Star teacher from Shawnee Mission Northwest, Ms. Sheila Young. Ms. Young is a transformational teacher, making those essential connections that inspire her students. She goes above and beyond to empower each of them to find their own voice. High school is a time of significant growth, marked by transition, a vulnerable time for many. Our students know they have an advocate and dedicated guide for this part of their life's journey. Whether in Writer's Workshop, freshman ELA classes, or as co-sponsor of our Black Student Union, Ms. Young creates a space where every one of her students truly belongs. There is a contagious enthusiasm that radiates from Ms. Young's classroom, and students want to be a part of it. She provides students choice and voice in their learning, creates a thriving community, and develops the next generation of leaders. Ms. Young has intentionally invested her time and energy to not only help her students find their voice, but to actively listen. Listening is perhaps the most powerful aspect of communication. Ms. Young goes beyond simply hearing her students' perspectives. She listens with such genuine care and compassion that each of them recognize her commitment to their growth as learners and as individuals. And I'm excited to welcome Isabella to the microphone to share her thoughts.
When I think of Miss Young, the first thing that comes to mind is the safe space she creates in her classroom. She puts in the time and effort to make each and every student feel welcome in her presence. She's a kind, compassionate, and thoughtful teacher. She gives her students the autonomy to make their experience in her classroom exceptional. When Miss Young sees that someone is struggling, she is willing to do everything she can to support them. She puts in the work to make people feel seen, and that is important. Miss Young is deserving of this award because of her dedication and compassion. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for everything you do each and every day, Miss Young.
We would like to thank the Board of Education, Dr. Hubbard and our district leadership team, and the SMSD communications team for the opportunity to recognize a truly exemplary educator and all-star, Ms. Sheila Young. We now have the opportunity to watch a video and learn about how Ms. Young makes a difference every day in the lives of our students. Sheila Young is a teacher who really embodies all those things that we hope for in building relationships with students.
I think what stands out the most to students is that she genuinely cares about their success, and students pick up on that.
The kids appreciate the fact that she gives them a little bit of autonomy, gives them more of like an adult presence in the classroom, and allows them to kind of choose their own path and how they're going to master certain classroom material.
Miss Young is a teacher that lots of students find her classroom is a safe space for them. She has this kind of magic touch with those students where she just knows how to relate to them and knows how to connect with them on a deeper emotional level. And I think she has a true talent for doing that.
She has also really brought to life our Black Student Union Club
and I really enjoyed working with her in that opportunity. Miss Young is a compassionate person. She cares about her students, and she's willing to put in the effort and the work to make her classroom a safe and enjoyable place to be in.
So I actually wrote my college essay on her. She doesn't know this yet, but I did write my college essay on her about how when I was younger I wanted to be like Miss Honey the teacher, and then I never saw myself belonging in the classroom. So Miss Young definitely has made me feel like I want to go into education, just having someone that I can look up to.
We're so grateful to have her at Northwest, that she makes a difference every day in the lives of our students, and we're just so excited to be able to work with her. She's an awesome colleague, teacher, and mentor.
Ms. Young, congratulations on your well-deserved award.
Thank you for everything that you have done for me.
Thank you so much for everything you did for us. You make my day better by being a kind and compassionate person.
You deserve all the recognition for everything you do for students, for everything you do for your coworkers. You've definitely impacted me in so many different ways. You're my rock.
Ms. Young, you're an invaluable member of Shawnee Mission Northwest, and I genuinely hope that my own children have you as their teacher when they reach Northwest.
Good evening, all. I'm a little bit of a mess here, so I'm also a softie. I just want to thank everyone. This means a lot to me. It's been a rough couple of years for us all, and one thing that does keep me smiling are our kids. I love our kids, and this is where my heart is, and I really appreciate this recognition tonight. Thank you.
So one final update. As you all know, at the last meeting, we approved for test to stay options starting January 5th, 2022, where students and staff may participate in test to stay after exposure to a positive COVID-19 case. The Shawnee Mission School District will continue to support testing through partnership with Mod Laboratories as an option, and testing is by appointment only. I want to provide this update because we received new guidance from the Kansas Department of Health. Their guidance allows for every other day testing for test to stay when using a PCR test. We have confirmed with the Johnson County Health Department that they will provide updated guidance to the district in support of this change. We'll be working with our health services team to fully implement this into our practices for positive case exposures when we return from winter break. So we'll provide more information as that becomes available. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Hubbard. Next item on our agenda is board reports. Ms. Borgman, do you have an update for us from SMAC?
I do. I have a great update from the clothing exchange, the SMAC Clothing Exchange. They just want to give a huge thank you to a great month of donations and shoppers. The city of Lenexa had a coat drive where they received hundreds of coats. Westlake Ace Hardware corporate office had a donation drive, and they received new kids' pajamas, new socks and underwear. Krista McCullough PTA brought in over 200 pairs of new kids' pajamas, and families shopping are up about 40% versus this time last year. So those donations are definitely needed, and as soon as they get them in, they go right back out. So thank you so much, SMAC PTA, for having the clothing exchange and all you do for our community.
Thank you, Ms. Borgman. Ms. Hembry, do you have an update for us from the Education Foundation?
No updates this time.
Reverend Guy, do you have an update from the KASB Board of Directors?
Just that we'll be meeting via Zoom this Thursday to vote on the legislative platform, and that will be with all of the representatives throughout the state of Kansas. It's not just the board, it's all of the school districts who are part of KASB. So I will be on that call and voting on our behalf. That's all.
Thank you. Dr. Sinclair, do you have an update for us from the Legislative Committee?
I have no new information, and just to relay to Reverend Guy, I've received no additional input on any changes to the KASB platform.
Ms. Goodburn, do you have an update from the Policy Review Committee?
I do, a little bit. We met on December 6th, spoke about 3 or 4 policies that needed some updating from KSB and also some changes to statute that we needed to update. So we won't have those on our agenda until January, though. So that's what I have.
Okay. And then, Mr. Stratton, do you have an update for us from the Finance and Facilities Committee?
No update other than our meeting is set for February.
Thank you so much, everyone. Moving on to the board financial report, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hubbard and Russ.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn over to Russ for 2.03 to talk about our board financials and an ESER 2 financial update. And then additionally, he's going to move on to 2.04 for the comprehensive financial report with our auditors. So, Mr. Knapp.
Thank you, Dr. Hubbard. So the November board financial reports and the ESER 2 financial reports through November 30th is attached for the board for your review. Last month we talked about the results from the headcount audit from KSDE, and we're estimating that we'll lose about $4.2 million in general state aid and LOB authority. As far as the expenditure side at this time, we are looking good. December was another good month weather-wise, so we'll keep monitoring our utilities as we go through the winter months, but right now I don't have any major line items that are exceeding budget at this time. So no bad news at this time. So I will move on to 2.04. The state statutes require that we do an annual independent audit each year. And so I am pleased to present the annual comprehensive financial report for the year ended June 30th, 2021. BT and Company is the accounting firm that conducted it, and I have Karen Lynn here, who's the managing director of BT and Company, to present a little summary report of the audit.
Good evening. I appreciate a few moments of your meeting this evening to present the results of the audit. There are 2 documents that are associated with the audit that I believe you have. Is that correct? What I'd like to do is to just take a few moments to go through the one that's titled Report to the Board of Education. That document includes the conclusions that are required by our audit standards to convey to you as the governing body. First, our responsibility is to perform the audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. Those standards require that we plan and perform the audit with the objective of forming an opinion about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. So we design our audit with that objective in mind. We were able to issue an unmodified opinion, which does state that, in our opinion, the financial statements are free of material misstatement. We also perform the audit in accordance with government auditing standards, Single Audit Act, Uniform Guidance, and OMB's compliance supplement, and that is because of the federal dollars that the district spends. This year, there was about $23.5 million of federal dollars that were expended by the district. We audited 3 federal programs, and that was a result of the risk analysis that we performed on the federal programs. And we were able to issue reports that indicated that there were no compliance issues and no internal control issues related to those programs. In addition, the Kansas Municipal Audit and Accounting Guide has some additional procedures that we perform as a part of our audit procedures. Additionally, things that we look at as a part of the audit include your accounting policies and practices, and we look at those to make sure that they are appropriate and consistently applied. We also look at accounting estimates to make sure that they are reasonable. In this packet, we have a table that shows the significant estimates within the district's financial statements, and those include the OPEB, the other post-employment benefit liabilities, the self-insurance reserves, and the net pension liabilities. We did review the processes for all 3 of those, and we determined that those were all reasonable. There were some audit adjustments that were prepared during the audit process, and these are also attached in this document if you have it in front of you, and they're there for your reference. Most of those are just standard entries that we make to roll forward fund balance or for other things like that that we make as a part of the audit process. Other things that we would bring to your attention, these mostly are because we would bring to your attention if there were issues or problems, things like disagreements about accounting matters, disagreements about auditing issues. If, for example, if things were requested by us for the audit process and they were refused to us, anything like that could be an issue of more serious issues or red flags of problems. We would make sure to bring those to your attention as a board when they came to our attention, and we would not wait till this evening so that you would be aware of those. We did not have anything that would fit into any of those categories. We had great cooperation. Mr. Knapp and his team were very responsive, very prepared, and very willing to provide any information that we needed from the audit process, and we were able to work through everything very efficiently. So we appreciate that, and we want to make sure that you're aware that his team is very responsive. We did have one significant deficiency that's referenced in the financial statement on page 117. The management's response and corrective action is also detailed there, and you can review all of the information and details related to that in the financial document. It is related to capital asset reconciliations. The last item that I want to bring to your attention is the letter in the packet that is just beyond the table of estimates. This is management's representation letter. It again is required by our audit standards to have things that we discuss during the audit process and that are underlying the financial statements to be reported back to us in letter form, in writing. And they are here in this letter. It's a fairly lengthy letter, but it does include a lot of important pieces of information from the audit process and from the financial statement process. So we encourage you to read this letter to help you understand the financials as you read through them, as you digest all of the information that's in the lengthy financial statements. Also for your fiduciary responsibility towards financial accounting matters, all of the things in this letter can help you with that as well. So we encourage you to read through that, and please ask any questions, can be referred to us if you have any as you read through that letter. So with that, I would open for any questions that anyone might have about the conclusions or about the audit process, or anything that anyone might have questions about.
Are there questions from board members at this time? I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. It's very appreciated.
Thank you very much.
All right, well. Can I? Oh, yeah, never mind. Dr.
Oh, no,
Sinclair,
I'm sorry. I wanted to go back to 2.03, just a quick question.
Sure.
On the ESSER funds. I know you've been reporting on that for each month. And I appreciate the thoroughness of the audit. I did not mean to diminish that at all. That was incredibly comprehensive, and I think a testament to our team. The quick question about the ESSER funding. So we essentially have about $10.5 million this year. And the ESSER 3 award, which I think we're working on a plan and getting community feedback on that. That will be an additional $10.5 million next year and the year following, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so those additional dollars are providing resources primarily for learning recovery. And at the end of that period, then we'll have to think about how we can manage without those funds. I'm just thinking about, public comment tonight asking about increasing salary, which I think we all would love to do for our classified staff. So we have $10.5 million we've added to the budget each year for the next 3 years, plus that would be an additional $1 million, I think, or something like that, if we were to increase the salary scale. So I just wanted to call attention to that.
If I recall, it was $2 million.
$2 million.
To increase the salary schedule for the paras? Was it $1 or $2 million?
One of the scenarios, yes, it was $2 million.
$2 million.
So all incredibly important needs and demands for addressing the learning needs of our students.
Yeah, and in regards to ESSER 3, we are, the community feedback has closed. We'll be gathering that information, and we'll be bringing a plan to you in January with the hopes to submit our application in February.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is the assessment update, and we can turn it back over to Dr. Hubbard and team.
Thank you. So we do have an assessment update for you. I'd just like to give some recognition to Dr. Grumman, who's going to present the data, but then also to Dr. Dennis and Mr. Stubblefield, who's worked with Dan on this presentation. So Dr. Grumman, I will turn it to you.
All right, thank you, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to share some data that connects with their strategic plan goal to utilize personal resilience while mastering essential competencies that lead to college and career readiness. We have several updates to share regarding student participation and performance related to college and career readiness. In addition to this slide presentation, you can find 2 reports and board docs that offer more detail and explanations. We're going to start with a brief update of the Kansas assessment results from the spring of 2021, so this last spring. Then we'll share an update on the status of ACT in Shawnee Mission as well as the latest results there. We'll then shift to an update on market value assets, which is a relatively new acronym that you'll continue to hear about for several years. And then finally, we'll close with an overview of the Kansas Seal of Biliteracy, which is an award or recognition that Dr. Hubbard has already alluded to in her update. So before we jump into the results, I'm going to take a little bit different strategy. In prior presentations, sometimes we jump right into the data. And this time around, I want to make sure that we all have a clear picture of, one, where we've been in the last 2 years in the context, and 2, making sure that we have a common understanding of what these scores predict. And in this case, we're looking at the Kansas assessment scores and the context and what the performance levels really mean. So thinking about the context of where we've been in the last few years, thinking back to the 2018-19 school year. In 2018-19, we had 0 students learning remotely. We had an attendance rate of 94.7%. Our chronic absenteeism rate that year was 12.7%, and we only had 46 students who missed taking a Kansas assessment. In the 1920 school year, we did not have state assessments. They were canceled for that spring. And in the 2020-2021 school year, we had over 7,000 students learning remotely for the entire year. That was about 27% of our student population. We had an attendance rate of 93.9%, chronic absenteeism rate of 17%, and 1,154 students missed participating in the Kansas assessments. Test security and logistical challenges. Because of test security and logistical challenges, the Kansas assessment could not be administered remotely, so schools did have to identify time and spaces for all students to take their Kansas assessments in the buildings. So outside of that number, we were very fortunate to have more than 91% of our students complete their assessments last year. That was a huge feat for schools to reach out to families, find time and safe spaces for then the remote students to come in addition to the students who were in person at that time. So that was a huge lift for our staff in the spring, just in the participation side of things. The Kansas assessment program includes several assessments, but we generally focus on the results from ELA and math as it does affect the largest number of grade levels. We do have state assessments in science at some grade levels, history government, which is currently in a new phase of implementation, and the Kansas English Language Proficiency Assessment, which is administered to all students identified as English language learners. In ELA and math, students receive a scale score that ranges from a minimum of 220 to a maximum of 380, and they also receive a performance level of 1, 2, 3, or 4, with 1 representing the lowest range of scores and a 4 representing the highest range of scores. In November, this November, the Kansas State Board of Education released the state assessment results from 2020 for all Kansas schools through the KSDE report card. So there's usually a little bit of lag time for all the results to be validated. There's some auditing that has to happen, and then they're presented to the state board, where then from there the data is made public. There are some important facts to note about these scores and the performance levels in fully understanding how the assessments work. For example, unlike the NWA MAP assessment, the Kansas assessment scores are not vertically scaled. For example, the skills associated with earning a 300 at grade 3 are different from the skills associated with earning a score of 300 at grade 4. In addition to scoring at a 300, that minimum level at one grade level does not necessarily mean that students on track to score at a 300 or better at the next grade level. In other words, there's not a growth scale like there is with some other assessments. This vertical scaling characteristic was not prioritized in the performance setting criteria when these performance levels were set back in 2015. Hence, while the Kansas assessment results are indeed a very important component of our self-evaluation, so I don't want to diminish their importance, I do want to make sure that we're clear about what kinds of conclusions can be drawn from the results. On that same theme, I'm going to take a few more minutes to talk about the performance levels in greater detail. Performance level descriptions have evolved over the last decade. As it is with many documents used for setting policy, the words do matter in these performance level descriptors. At one of the state advisory committees that I'm on, we've even discussed having whether or not to even describe these levels beyond just the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 because of some of those challenges. Nonetheless, here are the descriptions that currently appear on the Kansas Assessment website. So level 1 is currently described as a student at level 1 shows a limited ability to understand and use the skills and knowledge needed for post-secondary readiness. Level 2 uses the word basic. Level 3 uses the word effective. Level 4 uses the word excellent. But as you may be very aware, other descriptors have been associated with these performance levels. For example, there was a point where students scored at level 3 had really been described as on track for college and careers, and that phrasing gets tough when it can also imply that students scoring at level 2 and below are the opposite of being on track somehow. So if you're a student who receives a level or 1 or a level 2, what's the messaging there if you're that type of student? Unfortunately, the old descriptions are still floating around, which has created some debate about what these levels really mean. So there's a research question built in here that I'm going to share so some of those conclusions. Is there really a hard line between that level 3 and level 2? And is it true that students scoring at a level 2 are really not on track for success? So earlier this fall, I invested some time in trying to answer this question, at least for the college ready portion. We do have a data sharing agreement with the National College Clearinghouse in which we are able to obtain, for the most part, college going and college persistence and college completion information on our graduates, at least for the colleges that do participate in the clearinghouse. In order to capture whether students are college ready and successful in college, you do have to wait until they've had an opportunity to go to college. So we have to work backwards to identify a workable cohort for this study. So the latest opportunity to do so was with the class of 2019, because then by this point they're at least past their potentially second year of college. So the data set that we're using to answer the question, they completed their Kansas assessments as 10th graders in 2017, graduated in 2019, and were most recently able to reach their second year of post-secondary education in the 2020-2021 school year. The full details of the study are in board docs. The key observations are on the bottom of the slide. First, there is no risk cliff between level 3 and level 2. There's no magical thing that happens if you happen to be at level 2 versus level 2 it's not a yes-no kind of question. Okay? In other words, we did not find any evidence to suggest that students at level 3 were, quote, college ready, and students at level 2 were somehow not college ready. In fact, we see students from any of the 4 performance levels attending and succeeding in or completing a post-secondary program. So this slide offers some additional detail, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the numbers here. Looking at the top, among all students in the class of 2019 or in this data set, 68.5% were identified as having enrolled in a 2- or 4-year college. Keep in mind, this is an underestimate because some colleges do not participate in the clearinghouse. I'll give you a few examples. Students who attend military academies like West Point and the Naval Academy, they are not included. They don't; those places don't report their data back to the clearinghouse. St. Louis University, for some reason, is another one that comes to mind that's not on the list. So there are some that still don't necessarily participate in the clearinghouse. But among all the students in the class of 2019 who enrolled in that first year out of high school, okay, 90% of that group continued to enroll in a 2 or 4 year college in that second year. That's what's called a persistence rate. So 90% were persisting into that second year of post-secondary studies. That's in the class as a whole. Below that, you can see the distribution by Kansas assessment performance levels from their 10th grade year. For example, if you just look at the next 3 rows or so, you can see that more than 40% of the students who had scored at level 1 on their state assessments enrolled in college. And moreover, nearly 80% of these college attendees either complete a degree or continue to enroll in year 2, because occasionally a student might finish their program after year 1 or after a year and a half or so. We acknowledge that these values are lower than the overall class average, but the point here is that we see many students at this level enrolling and persisting in a post-secondary program. Moving down the chart to students who scored at level 2 in their 10th grade Kansas assessment, you can see that their college enrollment and persistence rates are similar to the class as a whole. You can also see, moving down the list, students scoring at level 3 or higher have rates of college going and persistence that are a little higher than the class as a whole. So scoring a higher levels on these tests does appear to be associated with higher levels of college activity, but again, there's not this veritable cliff in the data between level 3 and level 2. I also want to point out that our persistence rates at all levels are very strong. The range in persistence rates is somewhere between 78% and 95%. Ultimately, in the analysis of my report confirms, again, what many other studies have shown too, and this shows up in the further analysis in the report. It's not quite on the screen, but the strongest high school predictors of college going and college persistence are not test scores, okay? The stronger predictors, the ones that sort of wash out the effects of test scores, are socioeconomic status and cumulative high school GPA. Those are among the strongest high school predictors for post-secondary success, at least from the K-12 level, okay? So at best, I would say test scores, they do serve as a modest predictor of success in the absence of other data, but a single test score does have some challenges and it can be problematic by itself. So let's take a quick look at the results. Again, remember that we did not have state assessments in 2020. So our most recent year to compare with is from the 2019 school year. And as I'm looking across, comparing, let's say, the percent at each level in 2019 for the district against the percent of students at each level for the district in 2021, Shawnee Mission student performance and statewide performance on the Kansas assessments in English language arts has been resilient. Overall, the percent of students scoring at levels 4, 3, and 2 decreased slightly, but I wouldn't say it's significant considering, I guess in one way you could say what could have been, considering the circumstances. So moreover, our performance in relation to the statewide data has been consistent, the difference between Shawnee Mission performance, which is stronger than the statewide data as a whole. Now this is a busy graph, might be an understatement. Moving on to the distribution by identified student groups, our data is stable for most groups, and let me just do a quick explanation of what you're looking at. First, across the bottom are each of the identified student groups that you would normally find at a state assessment. So looking across, you have white, Hispanic, Black or African American students, Asian, multiracial, free lunch, reduced lunch, English language learners, and students with disabilities. Then as you're looking at the bars, it alternates. The first bar is district data from 2019. The second bar is state data from 2019. The third bar is district data from 2021. The fourth bar is state data, so it alternates a bit. So our data is fairly stable for most groups. There are 2 groups that we need to keep an eye on, and those are our English language learners and our Hispanic students, of which there's substantial overlap between those 2 groups. Some additional background to consider from last year. The demographic makeup of each of the learning mode groups were not the same. Our families who chose remote learning for the entire year had a higher proportion of ELL students, non-Y students, and students qualifying for free or reduced lunch. And I don't have the full data here, but we can speculate that students whose first language is not English might struggle a little more with some academics without having that day-to-day in-person interaction that can occur within in-person learning. But anecdotally, we've heard a lot from our ELL teachers have been noticing how excited their students are to be physically back in school this year. Most of our ELL students are back in with us and in person. So overall, our curriculum specialists, instructional coaches, interventionists, and teachers are working very hard this year to keep students growing in their reading and ELA skills through additional trainings for staff on the science of reading, as well as providing additional resources and training for interventions. Here's the comparative data across all students in mathematics. If you remember in two other board presentations from this last year, we had been reporting that the pandemic seemed to have a greater impact on student growth in mathematics. And our Kansas assessment results in math are congruent with our prior reports, in that we're seeing more movement in mathematics compared to our ELA results. Although, to be completely frank, they didn't, I would say, drop as much as I was expecting for this. So we have, and in fact, as you see the percentages in each of these individual subgroups, the percentages did move downward in between 2019 and 2021, but I would say not by a whole lot, not by very much, 3%, maybe 4% in some areas. You can also see that our Shawnee Mission data is parallel to the statewide results. For example, the difference at each level between Shawnee Mission and Kansas in 2019 are similar to the differences within each level in 2021. So that's another thing I look for is where are we in relation to the state pattern as well. Here are the results by student group in mathematics. Again, there's a lot to digest here, so there are a few places you can find that, if you want to really dig into the details, you can go visit the Kansas Building Report Card reports, and you can see district-wide results by district, by grade level, by all sorts of types of information. And of course, this PowerPoint, the presentation is available in board docs as well. The amount of change from 2019 to 2021 across each student group is similar. We know that we have some ground to cover in math across the board. Our CARES teams have helped prioritize support for mathematics this year. Curriculum coordinators are doing a tremendous job in working with coaches, teachers, and interventionists to make sure that data, resources, and interventions are in place to systematically keep students moving forward in mathematics. So this is certainly an emphasis of the work that's happening this year. So we use ACT results as another indicator of college readiness. Like Kansas assessments, we need to fully understand the context before we jump into the results. So again, a more detailed version of ACT results can be found posted in the board docs, and I included some narrative explanations of how some of the data is used, especially some of the benchmark values that we look at. Kansas students are fortunate to have had a free opportunity to participate in the ACT, and I believe we're moving into the third year, maybe the fourth year of that opportunity. The Kansas legislature has voted to continue funding this opportunity, which resulted in an increase in ACT participation in Shawnee Mission, beginning with the class of 2020. And what this opportunity is there's a date in the spring, usually the end of February. This year it's March 1, where public school juniors can take the ACT at no cost. And there's a specific date that's designated for that. For the class of 2021, that free opportunity happened in the last week of February. So the state-funded opportunity may have had an unanticipated benefit with the pandemic, in that sense that students in the class of 2021 have the opportunity to take the state-funded ACT in February of the junior year, which happened to be at the end of February, and which also happened to be right before schools were closed, the pandemic began, and so on. So a number of students may not have had another opportunity after that point. So I think that's been a plus that's sort of worked out for us. That being said, and I'm sharing some statistics at the bottom of the screen about some ACT testing behaviors. So normally in a normal cohort, the students will take the ACT more than once. So about 50 to 60% of any given graduating class contains students who have taken the ACT twice, 3 times, 4 times, even up to 6 or 7 times at times. The class of 2021, only 39% of that class has had more than one ACT score. And some of what you were seeing here is if they took the ACT, they had the state-funded ACT opportunity. After that point, a lot of Saturday testing closed down, right, canceled, and there are just fewer opportunities, fewer test locations available for students to participate in the ACT at the end of their junior year and moving into their senior year. So, and then you can also see on the right-hand side, and I'm going to emphasize that the last score, because these cohort reports use the student's last score for the report. And in this context, in the class of 2021, 38% of the students, that state-funded opportunity was their last score. In other words, the rest of them had maybe some other score after that date. And with the case of the class of 2021, 64% of that group, that was the last time they took an ACT. ACT scores are reported on a scale of 1 to 36. There are some thresholds that students typically need to aim for. One of them is the minimum score associated with qualified admissions at our 6 state universities in Kansas. You can see that students need a minimum composite score of 21 on the current qualified admissions standards. However, you also note if you look closely, there's the word "or" sitting there for Emporia, Pitt State, Fort Hays State, and so on. In fact, all except the University of Kansas in this case. So 5 of the 6 state universities don't actually require a report of a test score for admissions. You may have also noticed in the news that even before the pandemic, a growing number of colleges is moving toward test optional admissions. So I believe that will also have an effect on student testing behaviors, whether or not students decide to take the test multiple times, those kind of things. There's sort of a shift in the, let's say, the way students and counselors maybe are approaching the ACT, and some of that maybe depends on what kind of colleges the students are interested in. As we noted earlier, participation in the ACT increased with the class of 2020, which was the first cohort to have the free opportunity to take the assessment. Participation rates among student groups was relatively stable from 2020 to 2021. We do have a small dip in participation of a couple student groups that we'll just need to keep an eye on over the next year or so. Here we have a 21-year trend of average composite scores for Shawnee Mission. It's not very often that we can find average scores that cover that many years. So you have a 21-year trend of average composite scores for Shawnee Mission, Kansas, and the nation. And you can see with the increase in participation from the last 2 years, we are also seeing a decrease in those average scores. Not only in Shawnee Mission, but also you see that happening statewide. We also know that the class of 2021 had fewer opportunities to take the ACT. Again, I'm going to highlight that the fall of that senior year, students really didn't have that opportunity. And that might also be contributing to this year's decline in average scores. Again, these cohort reports are based on each student's last ACT score, which might not necessarily be their best score. So that's a part of the consideration. Now, this is really small and hard to read, so I went ahead and zoomed in on that data so you could kind of see the scale of things. This graph shows average ACT scores by So this is what the trend looked like when it's zoomed in on the right-hand side. Also added some shading that shows where the Kansas region's qualifying score, that 21 that I mentioned earlier. The good news is that the average composite score for Shawnee Mission remains above that threshold, even while the national and state averages have dipped below that 21 qualified admissions level. A couple of other interesting facts to note that are not shown in this graph is that while ACT participation in Shawnee Mission and statewide have been increasing, participation in the AC nationally has been trending downward. So interesting phenomenon to be watching over the next few years. This graph shows average ACT scores by self-reported race and ethnicity. You'll see in the right-hand bar that some students will choose not to report their race to ACT, so this is self-reported demographics. Again, the shaded region is where that 21 threshold is located for Kansas Regents admissions. You see that all students, the average score for all students, students identified as white, Asian, and students who identified with 2 or more races are above that 21 threshold. ACT averages for Black or African American students, Hispanic students, and students who, with no response, those averages are below that 21 threshold. In order to obtain student status in other student groups, such as free or reduced lunch, English language learners, or students with disabilities, I have to pull the raw data file together and match that data with our enrollment information in Skyward. And this is what our average ACT composite scores look like after that data matching. So, so some of the racial ethnic subgroups are a little bit different from the previous graph, but that's a result of that data matching when I'm trying to also capture students who are on free and reduced lunch, English languages, and students with disabilities. But you can see their averages here as well. Another set of thresholds associated with ACT are the college readiness benchmarks. The ACT readiness benchmarks are the minimum scores associated with success, which means usually earning an A or a B, in specific entry-level college courses. So it's tied to course success, not necessarily. It's not correlated necessarily to college completion or persistence. It's tied to specific courses. Is how they set up their correlation. Okay. For example, the English score of 18 correlates to a college freshman level composition course. The math score, which was a minimum of 22, correlates to success in college algebra. And here you can see the percent of students meeting or exceeding these benchmarks compared to the statewide results. We saw earlier that 68% of Shawnee Mission graduates attend college immediately after high school, and 90% of those students persist to the next year. So we definitely would like to see more students meet or exceed these benchmarks, and that certainly could help at least to make the transition easier for students who would need to complete these types of entry courses. But I also want to just add, there is some discussion out there in the field as to whether, for example, is college algebra, why is college algebra the gateway course, for example? Does every student need to take that to complete a program? So there's you're seeing some movement in what really is necessary for general education requirements, college, and in a lot of degree programs, maybe statistics or some other type of math course is more appropriate for those degree programs. So you're seeing some discussion about that as well. So, and not all degree programs necessarily require all 4 of these courses. So, so again, these are good indicators, good numbers to be looking at to self-reflect, and we certainly want to see greater success in these areas to help with student transition into their post-secondary programs. Speaking of transitions to college, the presentation on college and career readiness, this segues nicely into an update on market value assets. We get outside of test scores just for a minute. Market value assets are defined as industry valued and recognized skills acquired in high school that create a more seamless transition from high school to post-secondary education and or the workplace. And as you might recall, Dr. Fleury and Laura Harsh have done an exemplary job guiding our district's partnership with the Kauffman Foundation and industry connectors in identifying new paths for personalized learning. So, and you've seen other presentations on this topic. Part of my role in this is to help identify the mechanisms for tracking student attainment of market value assets. For this initiative to gain momentum, we need to be able to get this data into the hands of our principals and counselors so that they know where each individual student stands in this journey. So this is what I'm going to dub the Dan Grumman version of a market value asset graphic. So, and again, we have to be thinking, how do we keep track of all of these different ways to get, to get credit, for example? So there are really three different buckets that we can work with. They can complete an MVA, market value asset, an MVA, but meeting one or more of the criteria that fall in one of these three buckets. They can earn the equivalent of 9 or more college credits. They can participate in work-based learning, which work-based learning there's a wide variety of ways that they can do that through course-related internships, client-based projects. The project at Oak Park Mall would fit into this area, entrepreneurial experiences, and so on. Or they can earn a recognized certificate or credential, right? If a student receives a yes in any of these three areas, then we would say that the student has earned an MVA. Dr. Fleury shared with me earlier today that we are continuing to work with the Kauffman Foundation to refine the specific criteria for these areas. So for example, there's a list of certifications that would qualify in this area. And one of the things he mentions is that list of approved certifications currently is skewed a lot more toward healthcare and informational technology clusters. So we're continuing to work to expand those lists to make sure that we're capturing or able to capture all of the market value assets the students are working in. This table contains a snapshot of MVA completion through November of this year. So just kind of looking at the bottom line, through November of this year, among our seniors, 23.2% have already completed or earned one or more MVA. You also see some other columns where we have in progress, like college credits. We have 21.3% of our seniors who have earned some college credits, they just haven't gotten to the 9 yet, so I would call them in progress. Same idea with work-based learning. We have students currently, at least 20% of the senior class, in courses that involve work-based learning, entrepreneurial type projects, those sorts of things that are currently in progress that we can anticipate being added to that number. And then many MVAs are completed at the end of their senior year, particularly after students complete their AP or IB or specialized certification exams. And we're continuing to work to refine our ability to identify those in-progress students. That's really where we're needing to capture students and identify, are they working on something, or do we need to capture students that are perhaps not? So that's kind of where the data looks as it stands right now. As the seniors complete the senior year, when we get other test scores back in July, August, then we'll be able to provide an update of how they fared at the end after graduation. This is what that picture looks like if we're just looking at grade 12 by student group. And you see some variance across racial and ethnic groups. ELL students, we're continuing to work on making sure that we're able to connect all students really to market value asset type programs. So again, this is the first snapshot of those completion rates in grade 12. I would call this baseline data, so a place to start for making so we understand where we are with this. We continue to work toward making sure that we are capturing all the skills that students are attaining while in high school. Here's some challenges that we're continuing to work through. So, for example, there's some assumptions that we have to make because of the data available to us. For example, we associate a score of 3 or higher on an AP exam with 3 college credits. Actual earning of those college credits depends on the AP subject, the college, and whether or not the student chooses to report that score to enroll. So we do have to make some assumptions about the 9 credits based on the data that we have. We're also working toward finding ways to capture experiences and certifications that students may earn outside of school. And Dr. Fleury, I think, has talked about that in some of his presentations as well. We do need to develop a process that somehow incentivizes students to report their relevant independent activities to their schools, because we know there's a lot of that happening as well. This next topic correlates with market value assets in that it does recognize graduating seniors who have achieved functional proficiency in English and 1 or more other languages. And again, this is follows a little more detail on what Dr. Hubbard talked about in her update at the start of the meeting. This recognition honors skills that are attractive to future employers and college admissions officers. The seal of biliteracy does not currently qualify as an MVA, but is one example of a recognition that we should be talking with our employers about. Students earn the seal of biliteracy by meeting a qualifying score for any of the international related exams on the left and a qualifying score on any of the English-related exams on the right. So there's a variety of ways that you can qualify, but you do have to show proficiency or expertise in both areas, in the international language and the non-English language, as well as in English. There are 2 certification levels. There's a silver and gold level, so when I compile the data, I have to make sure that students are credited with the highest available performance levels among the choices listed. So when they have multiple scores in one of those areas, that we have to make sure we can pull out the strongest of those scores that we then report to the Kansas State Department of Education. So I may have made some people a little nervous because I was job searching. If you go to Indeed.com and search for jobs within 25 miles of here that contain the word bilingual, this is what comes up. We have nearly 2,000 jobs with the word bilingual somehow associated with those jobs. 1,353 of those are full-time offerings, 358 are part-time, 197 offer opportunities to work remotely, 1,526 are entry-level positions. And if you can really look closely at the fine print on this slide, you can also see that the job posting shown in that bottom left corner is flagged as urgently hiring. And I hadn't looked at run a count of those, but I'm sure they're out there as well. So it just shows students with verifiable bilingual skills are in high demand in our region. If we look at the report, here's the latest statistics from the report provided by KSDE last year. On the left-hand side, there are 587 students in the state of Kansas who earned the seal of biliteracy. 116 of those students are Shawnee Mission graduates. So, and we did have the highest number of any district of students earning this recognition. And looking at historical data, we do have 100 or more awardees every year, at least for the last 3 years. So we do have a substantial portion of students earning this seal, and the number has been trending upwards as students learn about this opportunity to get some recognition for earning a second language. I also want to point out in the bottom right-hand corner that 23% of those students were students whose English was their second language. So I would say that maybe the easier part was testing in their home language, and their challenge was on the English side. So that's a nice statistic to have in here as well. I will stand for any questions or thoughts or discussions.
I know Dr. Sinclair has a few, but it's possible that there are other board members with questions this evening. So I may start. I'll start with Ms. Boardman, and we can work our way around. But Mary, I know you can close this out. Once it's yours, we're just going to give it to you.
Yeah, Mary, we might be a while.
Go ahead, Mrs. Boardman.
Dr. Grumman, thank you. This was an outstanding presentation and just so much incredible data. So thank you so much. Do you ever feel like sometimes a report is just designed exactly for you? Like I feel like you designed this for me as a mother who has a high school senior who is interested in becoming bilingual and getting the biliteracy seal, who's in the signature program with the MVA, who just took her ACT. So all of this, I'm like, thank you very much for this report. It was very much speaking to me. With regard, I heard you say a number of times that these are students, this is a subgroup we need to keep an eye on. So when you say that, how does that actually look in the classroom? How do we actually share this data with our teachers so we can actually help these kids that we need to keep an eye on?
I think I'll lean on Dr. Dennis for a little bit of an assist on the classroom implementation piece of it. But on a day-to-day basis, we do have to make sure that one is that we have students appropriately placed in the classes and support, placed with the resources as quickly as possible. So when we're thinking about English language learners, for example, we are very efficient and very good about ensuring that students are screened right away, and in fact, they're screened annually to determine what their level is, and then ensure that we have the appropriate interventions in place for those students. We do work to ensure that teachers who have English language learner students in their classrooms are receive the training and support that they need for English acquisition, because not only are they, having to learn English sort of on a day-to-day basis, but they're also having to keep up with the academic language, simultaneously. An example of that is there's a monthly newsletter that goes out to all staff with tips and information about working with English language learners at various times of the year. So those support structures we need to make sure that teachers are aware of what those supports are, what supports are available as well. So because sometimes you have students that maybe they start the year with no English learning students, and maybe you get somebody 2 or 3 months into the school year. So we have to make sure that those resources are available on an ongoing basis.
This data is incredibly important in helping us to identify where patterns are, but it comes down to that personalized plan for every kid. It's about meeting an individual's need, not necessarily a group's need. So in addition to the things Dan said, we also need to be watching where those individuals are and meeting their needs as they come up. And that may vary even within a particular subgroup.
I would also say that course consumption plays a big role in some of this, especially when we're talking about some of those subgroups. Where we are encouraging, where we are supporting, where we are removing hurdles into some of those upper level classes, removing some of those hurdles in terms of, providing that targeted support for students so that when they are in some of those classes, that they get the supports that they need so that they can stay in those classes and keep on moving towards that track of, upper level honors courses and maybe some AP and even IB courses. So when we talk about keeping an eye on those subgroups, I think it should start before high school, where we are encouraging those subgroups to engage in rigorous coursework.
I'm going to add one more thought to this, how English language learners are designated in these reports. So when a student is screened annually, there's a point at which if a student is determined to be, if the score indicates that the student is fluent in English, they no longer need English language learner supports, they're exited from the English language learner program. So they're not identified as an ELL student for perpetuity. So one of the things then that you can see in the data is that there's the group of students there are all students who are not yet considered fluent in English. And you always have this cycle of exiting students out of the ELL program, so that group of students is always going to be an at-risk group. So that's one of the considerations as you're looking at that student, is that there's always going to be the fluency challenge is going to be a constant with the English language learner group because of the label and because of how they're identified.
Dan, do you recall how many students we exited as fluent last year? It was in the 400
Yeah, about
range,
400 students, yeah. So somewhere between 300 and 500 students exit out of ELL. They turn into like a monitor status, so we keep an eye on them, we keep track of them. There's a I'm going to say a tag in Skyward, but at that point they are no longer part of the ELL subgroup.
Excellent discussion. Thank you. I have a couple other questions, but I'll wait my turn. Thanks.
Reverend Guy?
I too want to thank you for this report. There is lots of good news in here. There's lots of challenges we still have to pursue, but there is some encouraging news, and that's great to hear. I just had one question about the MVA you talk about course-related certifications, and I'm just curious, are those certifications that have to come from an outside organization? In other words, do the students have to take a test for another organization to give them those certifications, or is that something we can create in-house so they can take it to a potential employer and say, the Shawnee Mission School District says that I am proficient in X, Y, or Z?
These would be outside exams, and then they have to be, they're industry recognized exams. So if we were developing something in-house, be a whole other process to put in place to then get it to be industry recognized. So.
And is there a cost for those exams, and has that ever been prohibitive?
I don't know if I could speak to the cost piece of it. I don't know if Dr. Stubblefield.
I don't know that I know the answer to this completely, but I can speak for my own child who took a certification exam as a senior and did not pay for that. So I don't know. It could be, though, that we're paying for them out of either Carl Perkins, potentially. Mike, do you know by chance?
Yes, Carl Perkins does pay for those. Yeah.
And there is some that's supported through the state, through former bills that have passed
SB,
as well.
Yeah, SB
155.
155, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Stratton?
Thanks. My question has to do with the Regents' criteria for acceptance to our state universities. There's the hard number of the 21 as an ACT test score, and yet when I see the charts are dipping down right to that 21 number. And then I noted that our average is 21.5. Thank you for jumping back to that. So we're at 21.5. But my question is going to be, ultimately, how many of our students qualify for admission into our Regents universities based on the criteria? Because if I look at just at the 21.5 and it's an average, I say to myself, wait a minute, that's not the median, that's the average. There might be a lot more students above the 21 than just, say, 50%. So I guess where I'm going at between, when you look at the ACT and then you look at the GPA, did you put in here, and maybe I missed it, what number of our students qualify for that criteria?
That's a great question. I haven't dug that to that level of depth. And it's difficult to know from the college admissions side. I can't see into that side of things what criteria they actually used for a student to attend there. And again, that's specific to these 6 universities. We have, I'm going to say 25% of our students who start out attending Johnson County Community College or other 2-year programs, or go out of state. So it would be difficult to know, which part of the criteria was leaned on for student admissions there.
Right, and it's a lot easier for I guess either one, the ORs or the AND at KU there.
Right.
And now I'll explain why I'm asking that, and that is because there's a lot of conversation amongst the public that's informed and not informed so much about college and career readiness, and so I always want to be armed with not only that we're at 21.5 on the average on the ACT, but I don't want that to be the standalone number and say, well, we know that it takes 21 to get into school. Shawnee Mission kids are barely doing it on average. That's a misperception.
Correct.
And so I'm trying to figure out ways to take that and go one step further, and that's where my question came from. So, thank you.
Dr. Sinclair?
This is by far my favorite board meeting of the year. And thank you so much for this analysis. It's not only incredibly informative, very profound information, and timely. So I encourage many of our state legislators who had a meeting just a couple of days ago, a special committee meeting in education, trying to understand what's happening in our public schools and to what extent our students are becoming college and career ready. So this is an incredibly informative analysis to help better understand and inform that question. What I think is great too about this analysis is the class of 2019 is almost that last group of students who had that experience prior to COVID, at least through high school. So it's a nice baseline for pre-COVID to understand how are our Shawnee Mission students doing. So I think that's important before we, as we're trying to embark on how do we help with the learning recovery for kids whose instruction has been interrupted because of COVID. So can you just help me? I want to just hit a couple of key takeaways and then ask a little bit more about this regression analysis. Okay. So like the top takeaways, I think, from this report is that, or from this analysis is, you know, number one, we have nearly 70% of our seniors from that class of 2019 who enrolled in college, and then an average of a 90% persistence rate for those students who are still in school the following year. So almost 70% of our kids going on to college. So from a college and career readiness perspective, that's pretty powerful, I think, even, you know, separate from all our other predictors that we've been talking about in those benchmarks. And that when you just dig into the Kansas assessments, you know, we have 85 to 87% of our seniors enrolling with a really strong persistence rate who scored level 3 and 4. But if you go into those performance levels of 2 or 4 that you know, I think it was slide 10 that pointed this out, you know, even, you know, 66 to 70% of those students who scored level 2, 41% that scored level 1, all enrolling in college, a really strong persistence rate into year 2. That's really, I think, a profound statement, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about what those mean, those performance levels when kids take that test in 10th grade. And what was, I think, most telling was, so you ran a regression analysis to really answer that question, I think, about what is predictive of at least college readiness, you know, in that. And so when I look at that, you kind of looked at not only Kansas assessments, but added in ethnicity, as well as some of those other poverty and language, and then GPA, right? And weighted GPA. And that weighted GPA is really kind of combines in that college prep course, right? If you're taking dual college credit, or IB, AP, you know, those honors courses. And my takeaway from that is really what becomes predictive of college readiness, at least in this analysis, is GPA and college prep coursework. The others wash away. Ethnicity does not become predictive. Kansas assessments barely registers in terms of predictability. It's really coming to school, getting support for taking that coursework, and the college prep is even, I think, kids are over 6 times more likely to enroll in college with that college prep course, and almost 15 times more likely to persist in school. So that's really, is that kind of the top line takeaway?
Correct. And right. And one of the things, you know, GPA is that, it's that, I mean, it's not very often that you can get like one number that sort of encapsulates like your entire high school career, but that GPA is about is pretty close to that, and our GPA formula is unique in that it rewards students for 2 different kinds of activities. One is, of course, honors courses, and the other is taking credit-bearing courses beyond a minimum threshold. So you get bonuses in 2 different ways.
The other part then about this regression analysis, again, ethnicity kind of washes away, and what really remains is the poverty component. So when we give our kids the opportunity, that's what I love about kind of looking at all the market value assets and all the work that's being done to make sure all our kids are participating. So when you give all those kids the opportunity to participate, what remains problematic is poverty. So if our kids can't afford to go to college, or can't afford to even, you know, they might enroll that first year, but then the struggle of persisting the second year is affordability. Is that perhaps one interpretation of that?
Yes.
Okay, I'd love to go on, but I'll take my turn
And
and go for a second
well,
round. This is
and
so
to,
powerful.
yeah, and to add to that discussion on that piece of it, one of the things that we're also doing in the background, beginning last year, is we have now a partnership with the Kansas Board of Regents where we, I get FAFSA, of the Federal Student Aid completion information, because that is also an indicator of college going and college persistence, is whether or not the students and the families fill out the financial aid documents. And so right now, we're getting updates from those, and I'm sharing those with the college advisors and college counselors, so they can reach out to students about, whether they've completed the FAFSA, or there's a couple little flags, if a student has some kind of flag that they maybe have missed in an email or haven't addressed yet, there's some opportunity for them to make a connection with those students as well, to make sure that's happening, because there are some layers that it can be a little bit intimidating to fill out that FAFSA the first time. So that's another piece in the background that we're working on to sort of help address some of the income gaps. In addition to Scholarship Shawnee Mission and making sure students are connected to colleges that they never thought that they might be interested in. So all of these things come together, and hopefully as we look down the road that we see some differences, some impact here.
Dr. Sinclair's excitement over this report, I have been hearing about every day for the last week. But it is very well timed with regards to the starting of the legislative session and the current discussions about the success of our students in providing actual data and how they're performing and what they need to perform. To have roughly 70 to 80% of our students performing well, entering college and persisting in college, I think is really important information for people to have because there's a narrative that is not the case. My question is more an observation and an ask for perhaps how we could potentially improve outreach to juniors, because it does seem like a significant amount of the impacts for what happens in their senior year when they go to college is happening the junior year when they're taking the test. And we have the benefit now of the ACT being paid for any student who wants to take the ACT, they can take the ACT. It is currently, so Jamie spoke to the fact she has a senior, I have a junior, and it is, our counselors don't work with our juniors on getting ready for tests or for college prep, they work with the seniors. And so if you have families where perhaps it's the first student in the family that is anticipating going to college, they might not even know that you can take practice ACTs online for free. They certainly aren't aware of opportunities or how to sign up to take ACT prep courses. If they are aware of there being ACT prep courses, they may not have the financial resources to pay for the ACT prep courses. So I am actually thrilled that so many more students are taking the ACT, and perhaps there's a way we can help bump that up for kids to get them prepped to do that. And this is beyond my capabilities, but I'm wondering if there is a method of even just sending out information at the beginning of the school year that, your ACT test date that is offered for free through the district will be on this date. Here are links to ACT prep information, that sort, just whatever we can do to communicate to the juniors, because if they don't know it's coming or if they don't know what's happening, they might not even sign up for the ACT.
This information should be communicated each year. If it's not I'd love to have a further conversation with you, but our administrators are pretty well coached in getting this information out, not only through the counseling center, but sending information home, as well as announcements to our students too. So if it's not happening, we probably need to look into it.
That would be fantastic. And I'm not calling anybody out.
No, understood.
I'm not calling anybody out. I just, it seems like we could have a more uniform approach in providing that.
Absolutely, absolutely, which is why we can revisit that and make sure that that's happening in all of our schools.
Okay, perfect. Well, that was my question. Ms. Goodburn.
You said earlier, what are the strongest predictors? If the ACT is not the strongest, these tests aren't the strongest predictors of success, what is, you said, high school GPA, I would
school.
imagine course content, course load that,
Mhm.
that kids take, students take, and socioeconomic status, correct?
Right.
So how do we know this? Data? I mean, have the college and universities come up with this data? How do we know this data?
Well, so there's I'm going to say, a consistent body of research over time will follow students from high school into college. That when you have access to those components, there's some pretty consistent body of research when they're running things like the regression analysis, excuse me, that will show that when you introduce the GPA into there, that the other effects start to come out, to wipe out. I would say some of that research, I would say, was maybe more recent because of the connections, like the having access to the clearinghouse data has helped with that, because you've historically you do have to, there are some lines that have to be drawn between K-12 education and the college level, because when students turn 18, you don't necessarily have access to that beyond that point. And the colleges on the other side also have to be careful with kinds of data that they have access to as well. But the clearinghouse does act as a nice mechanism for being able to connect those pieces together.
I'm just fascinated by this because I think it's probably the reason why over the last few years, more than a few years, we've been hearing about universities cutting, the ACT.
Right.
And it just seems like to me, and I wanted to ask the question too, do you think that the Kansas University is kind of dropping the ACT from the requirements? I would imagine it was sort of pandemic related, but you
Right.
think it's kind of here to stay?
I think it'll be around for a while, yes. And we were seeing a number of private universities that sort of started that trend, even, I'm going to say, roughly 2017 or 2018. So it's even been a pre-pandemic movement. Some of that has been in response to, there's some argument about whether ACT and even SAT has a racial bias in it that may be preventing some students of color from being able to get admitted to certain colleges. So I think as they're looking at their data and looking at how test scores might influence those decisions, I think they're looking at making some of these shifts. So, for example, moving away from using an ACT or an SAT score as a gatekeeper for admissions. They'll use it to inform. If you give them a score, they'll take it. But in the absence of the score, now they have other methods for being able to identify students who are good candidates for their programs.
It makes sense to me that your high school GPA and your course content that you take during the course consumption that you take during high school would be a way stronger predictor than a one-day test.
Right.
Makes sense to me, and it sounds like maybe the data is showing that as well, that the colleges now are figuring that out, that the ACT really isn't a super strong predictor of success, and they want kids to stay in, year after year and complete that, degree, right? So they want that, so I don't know.
And I would say in the absence of other data, the test score does okay. For example, if you don't know socioeconomic status, if you don't have GPA, or sometimes if you're getting transcripts across multiple high schools and you're trying to sort of calibrate what those GPAs mean across multiple high schools, sometimes they might still need that standardized score to help calibrate some of those things. So it does have a place in some of those decisions, but I think a lot more, and I can't speak for all the higher ed folks, but I do get the sense that they're all recognizing that they need to provide some other ways for students to be admitted into their colleges.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I can breathe. Go ahead. I just wanted to thank you especially for this report. I appreciate your kind of initial framing and backing up in context. It's perfect for someone like me who both loves data and also wants a really big picture overview of what it can and can't tell us. My question is a little bit coming off of Sarah's, which is, I think one of the things that, at least in health policy, that we say a lot is that you need to measure what matters. And part of what my aha from this presentation is that Kansas assessment results maybe don't always measure what matters, especially if there's this sort of level 2 versus level 3 is not super predictive of college enrollment or college completion. And ACT is starting to be less and less of measuring what matters, as evidenced by some of these schools no longer requiring it. But if GPA continues to be an important predictor, do we evaluate that? Do we get information as a board about how our students are doing on their GPA from over time?
We haven't yet, but we certainly can take a look at that. But the GPA is also this, there's a lot of complex pieces that go into that. One of the factors that we look at is Algebra 2 completion and success. We've looked at grade distribution. So all of those things do sort of feed into that GPA conversation. Course completion, AP and IB participation. So we've kind of, I'd say, indirectly looked at that in maybe some more specific ways.
I ask knowing that it's a grade we give them, so measuring ourselves against something that we're creating is a little bit tricky, but it seems like if it's such a strong predictor, it would be worth.
And I do want to go back to the assessment, state assessment, like a Kansas math assessment, it measures mastery of math skills, grade level skills at that point in time. Still an important measure, but we just have to remember that it's measuring math skills at that point in time. It's not measuring, is a student going to persist through college? It's too much there's too much distance between that one-day test and the rest. So still an important measure, still something we need to sort of benchmark ourselves against, but also temper that against, being careful about, overstating what it actually does measure.
So my third grader's really great math test doesn't mean that he's destined to be a college graduate.
It's a good sign. Sign of progress. But I worry more about the other side of it. Is if I'm struggling on my assessments, are we then telling students at a young age, oh, you're never gonna? And that's my bigger fear. Is the other side of it is that message that's being sent. So.
Thank you.
Circling around?
Yeah, just really quick. I did have a follow-up question about the ACT, but that's been answered, and I just cannot thank you enough for looking at the cliff to determine if there's a cliff, because that's a lot of kids that fall in that, the between 3 and 2 level, and I think that's an important message for everybody to hear. And then, so my question is around the biliteracy seal. Am I correct in that Kansas is one of only a handful of states that does not require students to have 4 years of foreign language?
I will have to get back to you on the answer to that.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that is just an issue that maybe needs to be looked at more on a state level, because just in going through this as a mom of a senior, I know that there's a lot of competition for spots, and I know that could be the difference maker for some students.
Right.
And when I talk to parents about this biliteracy seal, I think a lot of parents are kind of having an aha moment, like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that maybe I should have encouraged my student to really stick with XYZ foreign language. So just didn't know if you had any other additional information around that biliteracy seal and how it relates in Kansas versus other states. So that's okay. I can do some of my research.
Okay.
Thanks. And I'm glad that I stumped you, by the way.
Reverend Guy?
I don't have any other questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stratton? Thank you. Dr. Sinclair?
I appreciate the ACT slide. I think it's 20 or something like that, that just looks at, next one, I think it's slide 20. But just looking at that, the percentage of kids, the average score in relation to what that threshold is for our Kansas Regent schools. So we have 80% of our seniors who have participated at least once in the ACT test, is that right?
That's approximately.
So we have a significant portion, about that, significant portion of kids participating, and just in the last couple of years, a bigger increase since the fee was waived last couple of years, about 10% increase in participation.
Well, it's up to 80% now.
Up to 80%
Previously,
now.
it was 70, hanging around just a little below 70. And that would fluctuate from one year to the next. But,
okay. And I think this point was made, but we still have, even with that increased participation, we still have on average our score is kind of meeting that, above that threshold of entering. I just think that's, so you would, I think you said that, you would expect the average to go down a little bit as more kids participate.
Right.
And if there's less opportunity for practice, or kids are taking less opportunity for practice at this point in time for a variety of reasons. But on average, Shawnee Mission still is scoring at that threshold, which I think is really powerful. But taking the ACT is one metric. The other takeaway I get from this report is that we need to look at multiple metrics to understand whether our kids are college and career ready, and that and the fact that they're aligning in certain ways, I don't know, speaks to me about the rigor of preparation. So the fact that we have 70% of our kids, not everyone wants to go to college, but 70% of our kids are pursuing that. That's the information we have available on that portion of our equation. And we have a really high persistence rate. And so I think that's really powerful in terms of what we're doing here as a district. And just putting in context things like the Kansas assessment. I think it's important that we had this conversation today. And to remind ourselves that the rigor of the Kansas assessment cut scores was changed dramatically in 2015. And so maybe some of that confusion was about the prediction of those, what those meant, but now we know what they do mean in reality, right? So I'm sorry, I'm trying to edit my thoughts as I'm talking at the same time.
Well, and if I can interrupt just a minute on the so Kansas State Department of Education did take their performance levels, and they did an alignment study with ACT, with their college readiness benchmarks, which aligns with specific courses. So again, to that point, it's not necessarily looking at college success sort of globally. It's really targeted at, math to a math test to a math course with those levels. So understanding how they line those dots up is helpful as well.
Okay. But, okay, I appreciate that. The value, I think, of the value, I think, or one strong takeaway from this analysis is that the strategic, I think about the strategic plan and the work that's going into creating opportunities to come into school every day and to be successful in their core courses and to take advantage. I think Dr. Stubblefield, you were talking about creating opportunities for kids to take some of those more rigorous courses. So this whole assessment piece, where I think we have to pay attention to ACTs and pay attention to Kansas assessments, but it really is about helping kids come to school, be successful in their core coursework, take advantage of some of those more rigorous courses, and adding to that all the market value assets, the biliteracy seals, so that kind of robust preparation and seems to be what is most predictive of our students being successful. And aligning the additional resources we've had with the strategic plan and creating those opportunities, I think has been invaluable to be able to bring on more teachers, bring on social workers to support those efforts. Because the takeaway for me, but thank you. Appreciate it.
I have no further questions. Ms. Goodburn?
No further questions.
Ms. Embry?
I have a couple more questions, sorry. I am curious how we decide what we're benchmarking ourselves against. I know a lot of this, you kind of compared Shawnee Mission to Kansas to the nation, or oftentimes Shawnee Mission to the state of Kansas. And I don't know if, I don't know what the right benchmark is, but and what the purposes of the benchmarking is, but in my head, if it's about where people are choosing to live and send their students to school, we're looking at Blue Springs and Lee Summit and Blue Valley and Olathe, or if we're trying to find a comparable district to ours, we're looking at maybe like a Wichita or something like that. So if you could just talk to me a little bit about how I should be thinking about what we're benchmarking ourselves against.
So one is against ourselves, right? We look at our past patterns and understanding, you know, if the conditions, or if we're maintaining all other conditions except, you know, like if you know, a student population that's taking the test is the same, if the testing conditions remain the same, we're benchmarking against ourselves. But when we have a change, a massive disruption, say a pandemic, or, you know, things like that, then we have to shift gears and ask ourselves, all right, where are we? You know, you sort of have to let go of some of the past performance, for example, because you know the conditions have changed. So then you have to think, well, what else can we sort of compare ourselves against? And that's why in this case, like, we're looking at how, well, where are we in comparison to the rest of the state? Because we know, you know, statewide, they've faced similar conditions under, you know, the same, you know, curriculum, State Department of Education, those sorts of things. So anytime you have a change like this, you have to sort of search out some other comparative measure, at least in the short term. Moving down the road in future years, yeah, we want these numbers to go up, because at some point, hopefully, fingers crossed, that we'll be moving away from a pandemic and you know, ensuring that we're back in with full in-person learning, and maybe have to worry less about a virus, and can, you know, continue to focus on fully on academics and student preparation for whatever the next career is.
And Jessica, I think depending on who's asking that question, the answer is different, because some national ratings are highly based on AP scores. So a school like Shawnee Mission East sometimes won't vote as well because they have so much IB, right? So kids aren't taking as many AP tests in an IB school. There are so many different factors depending on, you know, as far as the State Department, the Kansas CAN initiatives. There's, you know, you could be measuring success that way. Colleges tend to look at ACT scores. Rarely do you see people looking at GPAs. It just doesn't happen, even though it's a very high predictor. So I think it depends on who's asking the question to that. But then that's why we look at so many data points. And I think it's very important that we continue to look at multiple data points that measure different things. So,
can I ask my last question so you don't have to do a whole nother round? I am curious, it seems to me that there's a lot of rigor that has gone into identifying what is predictive for college readiness. And I know our market value asset work is the beginning of trying to expand to think more about both college and career readiness. And I'm curious if whether Kauffman Foundation or us or who has really looked into what is most predictive of career readiness. And are these MVAs the thing?
So to that question, we have had conversations of, you know, we've got pretty good data, I think, from the clearinghouse to that point. But we are interested in labor, Department of Labor data, and so yeah, we'd love to be able to answer, or I would love to be able to answer that kind of question. So, and we have had some, I think, initial conversations, but the question is where, you know, where's that data located? How do you sort of establish those partnerships, and how do you do it in such a way that you can, protect people's privacy, especially as young adults, and that's, it's got some challenges with that, I agree.
I would add to that, it's that part of the strategic plan around interpersonal skills, and it's so much harder to measure. I mean, it's much more qualitative than a quantitative. And Dr. Ziegler, can you talk a little bit about the work with, I want to say it's Mark?
So Mark, but also Casey Rising, those are conversations in conjunction with Kauffman Foundation that have been going on for probably the last 18 months or so, if not longer, is just to Dan's point, to try and get data systems that we all can kind of benchmark with, and bringing business and industry into that conversation. We have workforce partnership at the table as well. So we are trying to, and there is a group affiliated with Mid-America Research Council to try and get additional data from all parties that would help us with exactly what you're asking.
That's great. That would just be my bug. I'd hate us to spend a bunch of time and energy having a bunch of industry recognized credentials and then find out they're predictive of people who have industry recognized credentials. I mean, that would be unfortunate. So just a bug for Kauffman and others to help us make sure that this will result in what we want it to do.
Are there any further questions? Okay. Thank you so much. This was a great presentation with a lot of useful data.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the consent items. If I don't have anyone who would like to remove an item, I would seek a motion to approve the consent items.
Move approval, Goodburn.
And do I have a second?
Second, Hembry.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. And we move on to our action items. Item 7.1 is regarding the calendar for next year with a minimal revision to the calendar for this year. And I can get a motion in a second, and then Dr. Hubbard can give us a quick. Thank you, Ms. Borgman. Is there a second?
Second, Guy.
Thank you, Reverend Guy. Dr. Hubbard, do you have a couple comments on this?
So yes, before you is the 22-23 calendar with minimal revisions, and then a draft for your consideration for 23-24. And I'm just going to ask Dr. Dennis to talk specifically about these two items.
First, with regard to 22-23, minimal changes, as you noted. The addition of Juneteenth, for example, which was not a holiday at the time the calendar was adopted. The biggest change, though, in 22-23 is the same change we made to the current school year calendar, which is the testing day, National Testing Day in October. We've, for the last several years, made that an early release day at the high school level. That was not in the calendar when it was approved, and so this corrects that. That brings us in line with our practice the last several years. For 23-24, I first want to thank the leadership of NEA Shawnee Mission, specifically Linda and Jill, as well as the SMAC PTA Executive Board, who provided feedback on the calendar, and it is a better document because of that feedback. It incorporates all those changes we just talked about for 22-23. To the best of our ability, we believe that it meets all statutory, regulatory, and contractual obligations. It maintains the high school late start, and there's room for additional, for something to happen at the elementary and the middle level, whatever that turns out to be, if there's a decision to move that direction. The other change that I would note is graduation moves. The equivalent week would have been the week of the 14th, I believe. This moves it to the following week, and that gives our seniors plenty of time.
So Dr. Dennis, I just want to clarify one thing. I know there's a strategic planning committee looking at a potential late start for elementary and middle to align with the high school, correct?
That's correct.
And if they indeed make a recommendation to do that in the near future, this calendar would accommodate that.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Are there questions from board members regarding the calendars?
I have just a brief question, and it is mostly for the benefit of people out in the community who may be curious. Can you share some of, you mentioned sort of state requirements and contractual obligations. The pandemic gave people the taste of what it was like to play around with our calendar and have late starts and early starts and long breaks and short breaks. Can you briefly share like why this calendar looks the way it does and why something like a post-Labor Day start would be difficult for us to do?
Sure. Post-Labor Day in particular would be difficult. We're required by the state to have a minimum number of student contact hours, 1,116 in all grade levels except the senior year. Seniors are a little bit shorter than that because they tend to graduate before school gets out. We try to balance the semesters to make them as even as we can, and it falls at winter break, and the high schools especially like that to happen at winter break. So if we move past Labor Day to start, that moves the end of the school year well into June. And we try to be done by the end of May when we can.
Thank you.
And it would also move second semester into ending in January sometime, so you'd have the whole break, and then students would have to come back and finish out second semester.
Right, you'd have a couple of weeks,
right?
2 to 3 weeks in January probably.
Like it did last year, I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any further questions, so we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, that passes 7-0. I'm sorry, what, Mr. Stratton? Yeah, prior to the conversation. No, that's okay. Item 7.2, approval of the renewal of the contract with Cisco Food Services of Kansas City. I'll get a motion in a second, and then we'll go back to Dr. Hubbard. Is there a motion?
Move approval, Goodburn.
Thank you, Ms. Goodburn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stratton. Dr. Hubbard?
So yeah, before you have our recommendation to continue our current prime vendor contract with Cisco Foods of Kansas City. And I know that all of you, as most people in the room are aware, that we've had struggles with food supply this year, and we believe that Cisco is still our best option for that. And I know Dr. Ziegler and Grace are both here if you guys have more extensive questions.
Are there any questions regarding the Cisco contract? Ms. Borkman?
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other vendors that we could consider?
So the request this evening is to extend the existing agreement for the upcoming year. This is based on a bid process that was run in 2017. I believe in looking at what happened in 2017, we sent out bid requests to, I believe, 4 to 6 vendors and got 2 responses. So for a district of our size and the capacity of food that we need on a daily and weekly basis, we are limited in the vendors that are available to serve us just because of our size. One of the things that Grace and I had worked on earlier this year when we started hearing of supply chain concerns, and some of our neighbors in the metro experienced some disruptions, which we've been fortunate that we have not had significant disruptions, and we've had great consistent communication from Cisco in providing, when there have been disruptions in suppliers, providing alternative for us to source. We started researching what options may be available down the road if we would need to make a change, and quite simply, there aren't a lot of options.
Are there any additional questions? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, that passes 7-0. Item 7.3 is an approval of a MOU regarding compensation for secondary teachers assigned to 6 teaching periods as we move to the 5 out of 7 process. I am going to seek a motion from Reverend Guy for this particular item, and then we'll get a second and we can have discussion. But Reverend Guy, this is your last meeting and this is the last action item. So.
Oh, then so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Goodburn. Dr. Hubbard.
So as part of the IBB process, they have come to this MOU agreement a little prematurely, but we really needed that to happen as we begin scheduling for next school year so that both building administrators and teachers understand what the agreement will be if I indeed had to teach 6 or chose to teach 6. But I'm going to ask Dr. Schumacher to talk a little more specifically about the actual agreement.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hubbard. Just real quickly, as a reminder, this is a really exciting MOU. It was born out of the Strategy 322 and that work-life balance that we've been trying to get to with our secondary teachers. Great partnership with the association throughout this process. So Strategy 322 is when it began 2 years ago, continued last year through the IBB process, and then again into this year with a subcommittee. So this year we've been working with the association and a smaller group to determine what compensation would look like should a teacher need to teach a 6th period. And I think it needs to be said that that would be out of the norm. What we want is everyone teaching 5 out of 7. But those of us that have been in that system where we are at 5 out of 7, there are random needs for 6, for someone to teach 6. And so we did have a great conversation. We looked at what other districts are doing as far as that compensation and tried to do something that was commensurate with the work and was the appropriate number. So where we landed was that it would be 10% of master's plus 15 step 1. Right now, that would be $5,200 per year or $2,600 per semester approximately. The good thing about that is that, again, it's commensurate with the work, we think. We think it's a good salary or a good supplemental. And then it will also increase should something happen to the salary schedule each year. And so it won't be a stagnant number. So we'll continue those conversations into the IBB process this spring as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item? Dr. Sinclair?
I appreciate the work of the IBB team to work this out. That's and to tackle this issue early as well. So my understanding is that, so the rate is, regardless of what I have in terms of my experience as a teacher, it's kind of set on that one amount. And then that also then allows some consistency, predictability in budgeting, but also, lets the teachers know where it's going to be set at. And then that can then raise so that particular, the master's plus 10, is it? Then
15.
That can be aligned and grow with how the schedule changes with inflation or whatnot. Okay.
That's a great summary of it, yes.
Okay. And then the other piece is that would be by appointment. So that would be those 6th courses taught by appointment of the administrator.
Yeah,
Okay.
the way that we have the language spelled out right now is there would be 2 ways. A staff member could make a request to teach a 6th period. The administrator would not have to honor that request. If they did honor the request, there would be no compensation for that type of scenario. If the administrator saw that there was a master schedule-driven need, so there needs to be another section, I would go to teacher X and ask them. They would have to agree to do it. Okay. And if there was that agreement, then this would be the compensation.
All right. Thank you.
Do you guys have any questions on this side? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, that passes 7-0. Now moving on to comments from board members. Ms. Embry, would you like to lead us off tonight?
Oh, I get to go first. So I want to just acknowledge that it is Laura's last board meeting. Laura, if we were to say that the last 2 years have been a whirlwind, it would be like the greatest understatement of all time. We had impasse in teacher negotiations, a pandemic. We passed a bond. We hired a new superintendent. It was described to me as being school board member bingo you never wanted to win. And here we are. But I wanted to thank you because even though it has been a complete flurry of activity, you have been calm and kind every step of the way. And I feel like your pastor demeanor carries you all the time in all the places. And you have called on us to be our best selves every step of the way. So thank you very much for your service. And please know that you will be very much missed. I also wanted to acknowledge and thank Dr. Atha, who has had 48 years of service to students across the state of Kansas. That might be older than I am, Dr. Atha. So congratulations. That's really incredible. And I just wanted to briefly tell a story that when I first got on the board, I remember I was sitting by you, Dr. Atha, when we were down here, and I very casually asked you like what the process was for deciding when we were going to have a snow day, mostly because my kids were really curious about it. And you told me that if it looks like dicey weather, you get up at like 2 a.m. and start driving the streets of Shawnee Mission so you can see exactly for yourself what the roads are looking like. And I was in complete awe of you for doing that. And I think it is just such an encapsulation of who you are as a person, is that you are not just kind of sort of maybe looking at what's best for our students, but literally going and walking the sidewalks they're going to walk on to make sure that they can get into our buildings every day. So thank you very much for all of your service to Shawnee Mission.
Yes, Dr. Atha, thank you. It's been a pleasure serving with you and being in meetings with you, and just the amount of professionalism and your calm demeanor. Talk about a calm demeanor. Your calm demeanor and your willingness to take on parents' calls for us, and your willingness just to do the work. You've been just a great public servant for all of Kansas. I mean, all the different districts that you've served. Really appreciate it, and have fun in retirement. Sleeping in, I guess. Not having to drive the streets of Shawnee Mission anymore. And Reverend Guy, I just wanted to say, I too said calm demeanor, your compassion. It's been a joy getting to know you. In fact, not only did you do a superintendent search too, I did one right when you got on the board too. And it's been just a joy getting to know you, and really enjoyed your perspective, your fresh perspective, and your analysis of things, and I just really thank you for your service.
Well, I'm a little verklempt. Dr. Atha, thank you again. Thank you for everything. I have an image of you walking out of the meeting this evening and throwing your hat in the air like Mary Tyler Moore. You don't have a hat. You don't have a hat, but that's the image in my mind. So I hope you managed to make that happen. And then Reverend Guy, I just very much look forward to you having the piece of being a former board member. Your dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion, to the well-being, the social-emotional health of our students, your commitment when we first got on the board to making sure every child had access to a hot lunch, and always taking the time to look at the issue from the perspective of what is best for our students, and then how do we make that happen. Has been very much appreciated, and I am sad to lose you, but very happy for you as you get ready for this next chapter of your life, and look forward to serving with you, April. Thank you for stepping up to run, and Laura, thank you for your support of April and getting her to us. So I feel like you both are on to wonderful things, and we will surely miss you. Thank you. Dr. Sinclair?
Dr. Atha and Reverend Guy, I want to echo sentiments that have been shared to date. I wrote notes to each of you, so I will leave my thoughts there, but I just wanted you to know you both will be missed. I'm grateful for your leadership. You've made the lives of our students that much better for being here. You will both be missed. And April, I'm looking forward to getting to know you and working with you. So thank you for being here too.
I'll continue with the praises of the two folks that are leaving these current roles. Dr. Atha, thank you for all your service to this district. I laughingly say that your fingerprints are all over this district. And what's fun to say about that is because you would never let us put your name anywhere on anything in this district, because we know you too well. But it's the impact that you've had very quietly but very professionally around this district. whether it's the physical structures or the way we do so much within our district, I couldn't help but kind of chuckle to myself as I was thinking about you sitting there and listening to Dr. Dennis roll out the upcoming calendars and all the work that goes into that incredible machination of putting together the calendar. I'm thinking, Dr. Atha's got to be just smiling behind that mask, thinking, how many years have I put together a calendar for this district? And you've done a wonderful job. I know you put a lot of nice tweaks into making sure that this is a great calendar that we have. And so it was nice to see the transition to Dr. Dennis and what you've done. But I know Rick's fingerprints are all over that one. So thank you for your service to all the students in all the districts you've served in your years in Shawnee Mission. And to Reverend Guy, thank you for your service the 4 years. I'll say this here. It was fun to watch you get your voice. You came into this role, I think, with limited understanding of how complex it can be. and you found your voice, and it was fun to watch you evolve as a true, strong board member, a voice of reason, a voice that when you spoke, all 7 of us went, huh, that is fascinating. I had not thought about that. And so thank you for that. But equally, I know that even though you're not going to be at this dais, you will be a very strong voice for public education and an advocate in this community. So I look forward to continuing to watch what you do next. Thank you.
Yes.
Before I say a few words about Dr. Atha and Reverend Guy, I just want to thank the Shawnee Mission community. This time of year is such a special time of year, and there have been so many opportunities for our community to help each other and to support one another. And it's just been amazing to see our community really come together when at a special time of year when some folks could really use it and need it. So thank you to our very special Shawnee Mission community for really looking out for one another. I wish all of the teachers and administrators and paras and lunchroom staff and everyone out there, janitors, everyone, just a wonderful break. I know you need it. I know you are counting down the days, the hours, the minutes, and I hope that you do not open your computers and you just take the time to connect with your family and sleep in and stay in your pajamas all day or whatever relaxation looks like for you. Also, Reverend Guy, it's been wonderful sitting next to you through the 2 years that I have been on the board so far, and you really have been a very nice calming presence in the midst of a very volatile time. So thank you for being sort of a rock for me in that regard, and just having some really comforting discussions, even as one-offs. And I am really excited to see what your next chapter looks like for you, both in a volunteer basis as well as professionally, so keep us posted. Dr. Atha, thank you for all of your service to kids across the state, Garden City. It's fun to share stories about El Zarape with you and just all the work you did in Garden City. Mr. Stubblefield does not like El Zarape, but anyway, so thank you so much, Dr. Atha, for all you do. You were very patient with me when I first got on the board and just really took time to explain things and made sure that, I understood everything just as well, as much as I needed, and gave me a lot of grace. And I just thank you so much and congratulations. Enjoy this time.
Thank you. Okay, now it's my turn. And since I am a preacher by profession, I wrote down a few thoughts, so I hope you're comfortable. Because there's a lot of things I wanted to say tonight, the end of my last board meeting. And I told you to not say nice things about me because that always makes me get a little choked up. I ran for the school board because my 2 children had had such a wonderful experience and received such an excellent education in Shawnee Mission schools. At times when they were growing up, I marveled at the privilege we had to raise our kids in strong local schools where the teachers were outstanding, the parents were involved, and administrators were forward-thinking. 4 years ago, I wanted to give back to the school district and community that had given us so much. And even though my time on the board has been relatively short, I can look back on some of our accomplishments with a sense of pride. One of the first things we did was we added a second meeting every month. We started with one, and now we have two, and we moved the start time back to 6 p.m., and we did that to make our meetings more accessible for people so that they wouldn't go on until the wee hours of the night. We hired Mike Fulton as superintendent just a few months after I got here, and he led the district through a strategic planning process that included so many voices at the table, students and teachers and parents and community leaders and administrators and even board members. And that strategic plan was truly built by our community, and it continues to guide everything we do. We've mentioned it several times here tonight and in every board meeting. As a board, we also passed a new non-discrimination policy. We passed a school lunch policy that eliminated the serving of a different lunch for students who couldn't pay. We passed a new mascot policy, and of course, we hired Dr. Hubbard to be our new superintendent. Our board meetings now also include very detailed scheduled reports like the ones we heard tonight that it gives us a lot more data so we can drill down, as Dr. Sinclair loves to do, especially, drill down on what is really happening in our district, what's really happening with our students, so that we can continually make improvements. So those are the things I'm proud of. But I prepare to leave the board with a deep sense of disappointment. There is so much more I wanted to accomplish in my 4 years. I had dreams and goals and hopes for all that we might do and see together. One of my biggest goals was to begin the research and conversation about what it would take to have a later start time for high school students so they could get more sleep. And we had students themselves mention this in a recent board meeting. There's ample data that this benefits not only their academic performance, but also their mental health. So that was one of my big goals that I had hoped to accomplish in 4 years. But COVID put that and lots of other really important things on the back burner. We had to deal with the urgent things in front of us. And as a result, some of the important things didn't get much of our time and attention, because honestly, there wasn't any leftover time and attention. My hope is that COVID will soon be a distant memory, and our district leaders, including the board, can once again focus all of their attention on improving student learning. That's why we're all here. Over the past 4 years, I have seen up close that we really do have the best people working in our district. And I truly hope that we will support all of them as best we can. As I've been in the buildings, I see our employees who care for our buildings and who care for our students' needs, the custodial and food service and paras and office staff and more. These people are all dedicated and professional and often provide care to our students that goes beyond their job descriptions. Our teachers have been asked to find new ways to teach during this pandemic, and it has brought out every last bit of their creativity and energy. And all of these people are exhausted. And I too hope that they find rest during their break and that they know their efforts are never wasted, because every day they invest in the lives of children. Our administrators in our schools and in this building are laser focused on giving students the best possible education. And they too have spent untold hours researching how to keep students safe, and they are weary from dealing with the anger that has been directed at them. And I hope they too can rest over the break and rediscover what it was that made them choose to spend their careers impacting the lives of children. And then there's Dr. Rick Atha and Dr. Michelle Hubbard. Rick Atha could have walked away a year ago and spent this past year fishing on a quiet lake during COVID, but he didn't. He stayed because he wanted to help us during the transition to a new superintendent, because that's the kind of person he is. He's always thinking of what the greater need is and how he can help. I think of Michelle Hubbard kind of like a firefighter, an administrator who, instead of backing away to a place that's safe, she rushed into the fire that is public education during COVID, a fire that caused many other superintendents to decide it was time to leave public education. Instead, she stepped up and applied to be our superintendent. We're very lucky to have her. And I think that if she feels she has support from the community, she might stick around, and we might begin to see some real improvements in our student learning. And lastly, this board, these people sitting up here with me, consists of some of the greatest public servants I've ever known. We don't always agree, but I never doubt that each one has given many hours of thought and preparation before each board meeting in order to make informed decisions for the sake of our students, our teachers, and our employees. There have been many weeks where we have spent 20 hours or more on board stuff. This volunteer role, and this is on top of our other jobs and taking care of our families and all the other things that we do. It's a real commitment to be a board member, and we are lucky in Shawnee Mission to have very committed people who step up and take this role very seriously. And I know that April Boyd Nerona will put in that same kind of devotion and commitment when she is on the board too. To my community, I want to say, when I started on the board, I thought I knew what a gem we have here in the Shawnee Mission School District and what it means for our community. I thought I understood how this works, how strong schools create strong neighborhoods to keep property values high and make our towns desirable places for new businesses to move in so they can hire more people who want to live here and raise their families. But it's so much bigger than that. Our public schools are a gem, a rare jewel, not just because of what they give to us as adults, but for what they do every day for kids. As our community changes, our schools have adapted, adding more services for students who are new to this country, or students with families who don't speak English, or students who move frequently or might not have a home, or students dealing with trauma, or students with special needs, and on and on. We create a place where every child belongs. And this happens every day in addition to teaching geometry and history and reading skills. That's what public schools do. Every day for every kid who comes through our doors. And there are some voices out there trying to convince us that public schools are wasteful and broken, trying to convince us that we should be taking money from public schools and giving it to private schools. But private schools don't have to take every kid. We do, and we do it with open arms. And yes, there are many places where we can improve. And if you want to know what those places are, ask Dr. Hubbard. She knows every place we need to improve, and she is determined to get us there. But I implore you, don't let anyone on social media, especially people who don't even live in our district, tell you that our schools are failing and we should just give up on them. People of Shawnee Mission, this is your clarion call. I've spent a lot of hours in this building, and I have seen up close how this district operates. And I tell you, we have the right people in the right places, and we have a plan to guide us. And if we'll stay involved and contact our state reps and tell them to fully fund public schools, we can make this district even better, stronger, and more excellent than it is now. But if we listen to the voices who tell us that public schools aren't worth saving, we will lose this rare jewel, and we will all suffer as a result. Our kids will suffer the most. All of our kids. Because when it comes to our schools, there's no such thing as other people's children. They're all ours. So please pay attention to what happens in Topeka and how it affects the students here in Shawnee Mission. So that's what I want the people of the district to know. That's my speech. I'll end by talking to my colleagues up here in the dais. There are very few people who know exactly what the past 2 years have been like for all of you. But I know. I know exactly what they've been. And as my last gift to you, I wanted to give you an award, because you all deserve one,
for simply continuing to show up. Even when we knew that people were going to yell at us and call us names we've never been called before in our lives and accuse us of things we'd never imagined being accused of, you kept showing up. So, my gift to you tonight is I've created an award for you that says simply, kept going. Because you did. You kept going. In my book, that makes you heroes, and you deserve an award. I also have one for Dr. Hubbard and Dr. Atha, too, because Lord knows they kept going through everything we have gone through and even more. I wish I had an unlimited budget and could buy one for everyone in the district, because everyone has kept going through some of the most difficult years we've ever known. But it has been my great honor to serve with all of you, and I know that with your leadership, Shawnee Mission's best days are ahead of us. Thank you.
Reverend Guy, just real quickly, I just want to say thank you again publicly. And after meeting that grandbaby of yours, I understand more than ever why you chose not to run again. Because if I could spend time with her, that's what I would be doing as well. But just know you will be missed. We appreciate your work on the board. And Dr. Atha, I'm keeping this really simple. Thank you. We will miss you.
You know, thank you for the very kind words this evening. I am humbled and blessed to be able to have served this school district over the last 6.5 years. What a great school district. Really about all I can say after everything that's been said this evening is thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a good run. Dr. Hubbard won. We had a theme celebrating the 50 years. She remembers this. She had all of us wear a T-shirt to get a T-shirt that was reflective of the 50 years. And I chose landing on the moon, because it happened in 1969. And I shared with Dr. Hubbard that we landed on the moon in 1969, and I was a senior in high school and graduated from high school that year. Dr. Hubbard never broke stride. She said, I was born that year. Kind of put things in perspective. But thank you for the opportunity. Greatly appreciated.
So I'm going to seek a motion for us to move into executive session to discuss legal issues. We are going to need a 5-minute break for me to compose myself prior to entering executive session. When we return, there will be no further business after the executive session. Our next workshop meeting of the board will be on January 10th, and the next regular board meeting will be on January 24th. So Mary, do you have a motion for us?
I move we go into executive session to discuss legal matters with our legal counsel pursuant to the exception for matters which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship under COMA. And the board will reconvene in the boardroom at 9:15. So we'll start at 8:30. Give a 5-minute break.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second, Guy.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.